This video is not sponsored, but it is brought to you by those of you who purchased my recent Fx30 course. More on that later. Sony just announced major firmware updates for the Fx30, the Fx3, and the Fx6. In today's video, I'm gonna explain what those updates are and why I think this is actually a really big deal for someone like me, who's a documentary filmmaker and uses the Fx30 quite often. All right, let's get into it. For those of you that are new around here, my name is Riley and I'm a filmmaker who's produced documentaries on multiple continents around the world using the gear that I talk about on this channel. So if you're someone who's into documentaries or making films with small crews, then you're in the right place. Consider subscribing and following along. All right, back to the video. Sony's announcement with the firmware update comes as a little bit of a good surprise for me because they did recently announce a firmware upgrade for the A7S III. And they didn't mention anything about these firmware updates coming around the same time period. And so this means that Sony is listening to their user base and they're gonna add some features that are really helpful and I think are gonna make life a lot easier for a lot of people, myself included. This means that basically all of their video-centric cameras below the Fx9 are getting some sort of substantial update. The Fx6 is gonna get a 1.5 times D-squeeze mode for using anamorphic lenses, and this is really nice if you use anamorphic lenses because you're not gonna need to use an additional monitor to properly de-squeeze that when you're filming. So this is a big workflow upgrade if you're using those types of anamorphic lenses. There's also an upgrade to their Lut workflow, and it's borrowing some of the LUTs and the color science and the color accuracy of the Sony Venice. Now, this is something that as an Fx30 user, I get excited about because the more that the FX line of cameras borrows from the Venice and the more we see that goodness trickling downstream, the more it's gonna improve the images that we have to work with. And this is something that I talk about in my course, Getting the Most Out of Your Fx30, that I think is a really positive of the Fx30 being in the cinema lineup of Sony's FX line, but is priced like a mirrorless camera. And so I go into stuff like this, including how to get the most out of the camera, how to work with it in run and gun scenarios, how to customize it, exposure, working with the audio top handle, and a whole bunch of other things in a 2-hour course with 19 video modules. And you can find the link to it in my description below. The Fx6 is also going to get some monitor and control app functionality upgrades, including the ability to use a waveform tool and false color on the built-in monitor. And so I don't own an Fx6, but these are really good improvements that I think are helpful. But I do work with an Fx3 all the time, and I've got my Fx30 right here. And so let's get into what these upgrades are gonna be for these cameras. Now, the biggest one is going to be the addition of shutter angle. Now, this isn't going to improve the end result of your image necessarily because we have the ability to basically double our shutter speed, which is what the 180-degree shutter rule is. So if you are filming at 24 frames per second, you're gonna have 1/48 of your shutter speed. And that's basically what the formula is for 180-degree shutter rule. It borrows the language of if you're shooting on film and your shutter angle, it's going through like a circular opening that exposes the actual film strip. And so basically an 180-degree shutter rule is always going to be the double your frame rate rule. So if you're filming at 60 frames per second, then 180 degrees is going to be equivalent to 1/120th. And so if you're filming 120 frames per second, that's going to be true as well. The 180-degree shutter rule is going to expose every frame at 1/240th of a second. Now, the reason why I think this is really exciting and is such a big deal and is such a time saver on set is because every time you take this camera and you switch back and forth between different frame rates, you also have to take an additional step currently to adjust the shutter speed. So if you go from 24 to 60 frames per second, you have to remember to adjust this from 1/48th to whatever the closest equivalent is going to be 1/125. And if you don't do that, then your footage is going to be messed up. And that's an additional step that is going to slow you down. So having the ability to have a setting on this camera that you can just basically set it and forget it is something that is super nice. And it's something that a lot of other cinema cameras have the ability to use. And having used this on my Red Komodo, I know a lot of you Blackmagic users are probably screaming in the comment section below saying you've had this for years. It's a big deal, and it's a nice time saver on set. The Fx3 and the Fx30 also have some additional live streaming functionality added, which is pretty nice. But the other thing that they're adding, which I think is even better, is the ability to flag clips after you've recorded. And so what this means is you can take one of these cameras and you can basically mark which clips are your favorites. And this is going to help you when you're editing, because those tags basically that you're adding to the clips are going to show up in post, and you're going to be able to find the best takes a lot quicker. So if you're filming events or you're filming documentary stuff where there is just a lot of footage to sift through, if you took the time either at the end of the day or when you were working and filming to be able to just tag, hey, this was a good take, then when you bring it into your editor, you're going to be able to get going that much quicker. These updates are coming later in the year, and it has me really excited because this additional functionality is going to save me a little bit of time in post, and it's going to save me a lot of just time and hassle on set with being able to change frame rates quicker. And so having the ability to have a workflow with this affordable, amazing little camera that is more similar to my Red Komodo and other cinema cameras is something that is a big advantage and is something that I am really looking forward to. Be sure to let me know in the comment section below what other features you would love to see on these cameras. Who knows if we're going to get more in the future, but I'm really excited that Sony is listening to their customer base and finally bringing some of these much needed features to their cameras. All right, I'll catch you guys in the next one.